So welcome to our weekly leadership lounge or roundtable talking about humanizing transformation. And this week we are talking about something which is really exciting because I personally love the world of quantum. And today what I want to do is I want to introduce us to the idea of quantum leadership and transformation. So that's what today's agenda is all about. And as all of you that come to our leadership roundtables will be aware of and familiar with is, I love starting with a quote. And I think what's really important here, which is a quote from InsideScience.org, is just understanding that, you know, when it says the cusp of the second quantum revolution, it gives us this sense of it's not just at the start, it's not at the beginning or the birth of, it's actually something that has been happening in the background for quite some time. It's just the inevitability now of how that brings, how that will come into our world of work and business and society is becoming an inevitability. So if ever there was a time for us to understand quantum leadership and quantum transformation, of course, in my opinion, it is now. So what I want to do is I just want to very quickly just share with you a 4-minute video. And this video is talking about something called quantum supremacy. And this just gives us an edge of understanding where the reality of quantum is in terms of computing and technology, in order for us then to start applying that and thinking about that more broadly to the conversation of today in terms of quantum leadership and quantum transformation. It's only about 4 minutes long, but I am going to share that video for us all to watch now.
The tantalizing promise of quantum computers is that they can do certain tasks exponentially faster than classical machines. And the quantum supremacy experiment is proof that this is indeed the case.
Quantum computer is a little bit misleading because it sounds like a computer. And when people think of computer, they think of a phone or a laptop. The truth is the phone and the laptop and even a very powerful supercomputer all operate according to the same fundamental rules. And a quantum computer is fundamentally different.
The classical bit stores information as a 0 or 1, and a quantum bit can be both 0 and 1 at the same time. If you have 2 quantum bits, then there are 4 possible states that you can put in superposition. With 3 qubits, it's 8, 4 qubits, it's 16, but grows exponentially.
The nice thing about quantum supremacy is that it is a very well-defined engineering milestone.
In a nutshell, what we're trying to do is we're trying to show that experimental quantum computers can surpass the best supercomputers in the world.
To actually demonstrate quantum supremacy, we have these 3 steps. First, pick a circuit. Second, run it on the quantum computer. Third, simulate what the quantum computer is doing on a classical computer. We gradually increase the complexity of that circuit. And at some point, it becomes completely impossible for the classical computer to keep up. Then we say we've achieved quantum supremacy.
We started building together the quantum chips to do this experiment. And then the evolution of the devices with more and more qubits and more complexity. It's very much an iterative process.
A lot of the work that we put in was not just these chips, but is also the infrastructure that you need to drive those chips. The cryostats that we install them in, all of the control electronics, software, all of this stuff is needed, and it all has to be developed.
When the experiment started, we were getting data from the experimentalists. We saw initially a beautiful straight line corresponding to our predictions.
Then right before we hit supremacy, it dropped much faster and it fell below the threshold where it needed to be.
And there's nothing we can do because we don't know how to analyze past that. So everyone's like, oh, we're screwed because it's getting really, really bad at large number of qubits.
It's like, well, maybe there's some really complex interaction between all the qubits.
It turned out that the reason was rather benign. We calibrated a little bit better and then this problem disappeared.
So there wasn't like a, oh, we did it. I think we crossed it, and then it wasn't clear that we crossed it, so we crossed it a little bit further.
It took me like a day to realize, like, hold on, this is actually experimental data. It's kind of amazing to see, how well the theory works.
The processors that achieved quantum supremacy is called the Sycamore Processor.
And it's parallel processing 2 to the 53 states, which is 10 million billion. And thus that enormous amount of parallel processing is what gives it the power.
When we run a small chunks of the computation, is the largest supercomputer in the world. Our estimate is that it will take thousands of years to complete the full computation.
Technologies are born this way. Let's say the space age started with a satellite orbiting Earth, and it was not doing much. It was just beeping.
The big technical achievement of quantum supremacy was really dependent on all this young talent who's kind of taken this and gotten it to work at a very technologically capable level.
We have reached a new computational capability. There are certain computations, the only place in the world where you can compute those things is here in our data center at Google Santa Barbara.
For the first time, we're showing that we can solve a problem that is just infeasible to do on the biggest computers ever made by civilization.
And what's exciting is now we're ready to turn this over to the world and say, let's figure out what we can do with this.
The thing that excites me most is building a useful quantum computer. When we can give a researcher a tool that is unlike any other and say, great, figure out something cool to do with it. Mankind is pretty good at that.
So there you go. That gives you a little bit of an insight into quantum supremacy and technology. And the reason why I show that video, and the reason why I think that video is so incredibly important for our conversation today in today's weekly roundtable, is that, so many nuances came out of that for me. I don't know what words might have come out of it for you, and please just, pop them into chat if you will. But, there's things like incredible processing capability. So the ability to solve incredible complex problems, speed, our ability to do things so much faster. Some of the numbers that were shown there were phenomenal. And also, when they were talking about the stuff that is required for the building and the maintenance and the usage and harnessing of quantum technology and quantum computers, shows us that there are skills and jobs that we probably haven't even thought of yet. So again, the displacement of the workforce might actually be an opportunity for new skills and new roles, as opposed to something to be scared about. So there's so much in just 4 minutes of that video. However, what I want to do is I want to start really bringing the story for today's conversation to more purely into the realms of today and who we are as a leader and the projects and programs of transformation that we all work on. So there are 3 elements around the quantum theory, around quantum mechanics and physics, and some of the things that we've just seen there. 3 of the principles that I think are really important, that are directly applicable to our world of quantum leadership and quantum transformation. The first thing is subatomic. And we saw that when we saw the video describing the idea of traditional computing being about a 0 and a 1, a binary, it's either yes or a no, versus that element. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But the subatomic piece is where you see that a quantum unit is called a quark, and it's subatomic. And it's tiny, 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 and there are many of them. So subatomic is really important. So incredibly small, and yet what that does is it outputs incredible power. So what we've got here is we've got a story of quantum micro subatomic shifts units in order for us to create huge changes. So very, very small change, very, very small application in design in order for us to achieve great, amazing things. So that's really important, that idea of subatomic to leadership and to transformation. The other area that I think is really important to leadership and transformation is this sense of entanglement. And if you don't know about entanglement, really it's you know, a very, very oversimplified way of thinking about it is about connection, is about the idea of what I do here has an effect potentially on something that is unobservable to me, that could be many, many, many years travel and distance away, and it has an effect on that. And there are loads of experiments. If you go into the internet and a web browser and have a look at experiments around entanglement, you will see this sense of we are all connected. So it's a ripple effect. So what I do here has an effect not just on what is observable to me, but also what is not observable. There's a lot more to that, but that's just a simple thing. So the connectivity, the implications and impact of who we are and what we do and how we think and how we behave. And then thirdly, that I mentioned earlier on as well, is non-binary. So that sense of we are no longer really designing projects and programs. We are no longer thinking about who we are in terms of the very single thing that we do, you know, that it's right or wrong, you know, the problems or the solutions, the single journey pathway to success is no longer serving us in the world, the modern world that we live in, because we're living in a world that is defined as complexity. So non-binary, more than one right answer. So there we go. So if we apply that to the world of leadership, to the world of projects and programs and transformation, what we start to see is we start to see things that we can be thinking about in our vision, our strategy, our plans, our designs and delivery. How small can you go? When we think that we're going small, can we go smaller? So really taking things down to first principles thinking and starting to think about what are the fundamentals of where we are now in order for us to create forward. That's really important, and small tiny shifts. And certainly when I'm working with leaders, a lot of the time we are so time poor. We're dealing with so many things now. This concept of portfolio is filtering through our entire workforce system, that we're doing many things instead of one thing. The key for us is to find the little gaps and to develop and to explore, to have spaces for stop, reflection, well-being, etc. in those gaps, so that we can start there and build them out. And also the second one, in terms of entanglement, you know, what we do now does affect the future. What we do now does affect people around us, even if we don't necessarily see them in the conversation that we're having. This conversation that I'm having today with you might be shared with someone else, might take a thought in your brain into a conversation next week, next month, in a few months' time. It might seed you to go down a different path just because of something that I've said today. What we do now affects the future and also affects other people. Thinking about that in our leadership and our transformation. And of course, number three, when I was talking about the non-binary, that there is different paths to success. There's absolutely more than one right answer. And that's really important too. When we bring that into our work, when we bring that into the concept of modern leadership, quantum leadership, the concept of quantum transformation, then really what we've got here is three techniques. We've got three practices that we can take away immediately today and practice in our leadership, practice in some of our design and delivery of transformation projects and programs. Minimum viable shifts. I always say to customers, if it's too hard, it's not small enough. If it's too hard, that's not a no. If it's too hard, it's just not small enough. So go smaller, and go small until such a time as you can find a way through. Minimum viable shifts. And the second thing is, in terms of entanglement, in terms of what we do now has an effect on the future and people around us, is this sense of the domino effect. It's a sense of rippling out. And the key elements there and practices are really thinking about who you are as a role model, who you are as a role model. So really becoming conscious of the effect of our words and our actions and our behaviours in terms of the wider system. And something else in our practice that we support leaders in and transformation teams in is the idea of Keystone Habits. And Keystone Habits are wonderful because Keystone Habits are essentially a single habit that has a direct effect on other areas of our life, our practice, and our work. So one keystone habit in our personal life might be that we want to start exercising, and we start exercising as a single habit, and we do that on a regular basis to embed that habit and to activate that habit. And over time, what we do is we notice different things in our life starting to happen. We feel a little bit more confident in our conversations and how we present ourselves in front of other people. We feel more courageous, and we feel, we just feel better about ourselves and more positive, perhaps. We start to eat more healthy. We start to build a consciousness about what we are fueling our bodies with to support that exercise, and so on and so on. All of those surrounding ideas and potential habits start to ripple out from that single core keystone habit of exercising. And when we start to apply keystone habits to the design and the delivery of transformation of our projects and programs to support people to engage in change and transformation, to reduce that resistance to change, oh boy, we've got lots of examples of how that is a real powerhouse. And the third practice around multiple right answers, of course, is experimental practice. And experimental practice is without question a really important leadership competency to develop. Every single leader and every single practitioner in the world of change and transformation really, in my opinion, should understand and have the opportunity and permission to develop experimental practice. And experimental practice is to think experimentally, i.e. to think about multiple right answers, and to act experimentally, to deliver different, to experiment with different multiple right answers and a combination thereof. Experimental practice is about high volume thought experiments and action experiments in order for us to funnel them, lots of experiments in, so that we know that we can create data that can inform us as to which path to move forward. Experimental practice is also incredibly important for us because it reduces our reliance on what's called analogous thinking. And analogous thinking, and you will probably understand this when I give you an example, is, you might have a business case. You might want to take an idea or a vision or an innovation or a strategy to your leadership team or to your line manager. And the response you get back is, where has it worked somewhere else? And if you can prove that it's worked somewhere else, then I will say yes to you. That's analogous thinking. So if it's worked over there, it will therefore work over here. And that has been okay for us through the dawn and the maturity of the Industrial Revolution. But in the world that we live in now, which is so defined by complexity, it doesn't work. We have to understand our uniqueness, that what's happening over there, analogous thinking is a support mechanism. It shouldn't be a driver for our decision making. Experimental practice and the data that is derived from experimental practice is really where we should be prioritizing our decision making. So when we think about those three things and we start to now look at the two areas, we start to look at quantum leadership and also quantum transformation, we start to broaden it out. And what you see here is you see the 12 principles that are included in the work of Dana Zohar. And Dana Zohar has written a book called The Quantum Leader. So you can go and have a look at Dana's work and her research. And this is research. This is academic research. And it talks to 12 principles that are the defining principles of the modern leader, the quantum leader, the leader that will be able to take us into the future, the leader that we should now already be nurturing and developing. And these 12 principles are fantastic for us in our framework and in the work that we do, because each and every one of them directly relates to how we help quantum leaders develop and practice. So whilst the quantum leader talks to what, our work really talks to how. So it's a great synergy in terms of these 12 principles and the Dilyn Way framework. So if you'd like to know more about the framework, then of course, as always, I say, get in touch with me and I will be able to share that with you. So we've already got an understanding of what quantum leadership looks like. Now, if we go through these 12 principles of what it looks like, not necessarily the how, because that might be a round table for another day, but what you can see here is you can see that there's quite a lot of diversity in here, right? We're not just talking about digital capability for the leader. We're not just talking about awareness and understanding of technology in the future. We're not just talking about data. We're not just talking about ethics. We're not just talking about courage. We're also talking about personal awareness and consciousness. We're talking about purpose. We're talking about ethics. We're talking about well-being. We're talking about systems leadership as well as servant leadership, adaptive leadership. What we're seeing here is we're seeing the human side as well as the technological side, the digital side. And I think that's what's so incredibly important about what Dana has uncovered in the research that is included in the Quantum Leader there. So this gives us an understanding of what quantum leadership looks like. And if we are able to harness and foster and develop these principles, then what that allows us to do is it allows us to build the capability and be prepared for the inevitability of what we saw in that first 4-minute video by Google, to understand that that is within 5 to 10 years of early adopter mainstream industries and sectors. So it is important for leaders to understand and to develop the concept of quantum leadership. The fundamentals of quantum theory allow us to redefine business and work. That's why it's so important. To do something different, to shift the paradigm, we have to be different. And it's so incredibly important for us to understand that. And in order to be different, the key element, the element that we should be focusing on from a leadership perspective is mindset. Not what we do, not the knowledge that we have, but who we are and how we do it, our belief system and our value system, how we think, our mindset. That is the shift that we need to make. Quantum leadership is about shifting our mindset, shifting who we are in order for us to then drive and lead and empower the paradigm shift into the future. And arguably, the majority of issues that we might have, challenges that we have around the success of digital transformation, more often than not boil down to human, more often than not boil down to mindset challenges. So it's really, really important element for us to harness. So it's who we are, it's our identity. That is what we need to be focusing on when it comes to quantum leadership. It is understanding that no matter how busy we are, there is space for us to be able to lean into and to start to practice more conscious awareness of who we are, and to start to shift and nudge tiny little shifts around our practice as leaders. So who we are and micro shifts are, for me, probably 2 things to take away from those 12 principles for how we can start to apply those principles into our leadership practice. So that's a little bit about leadership, but today I wanted to do quantum leadership, and I wanted to introduce you to this concept of quantum transformation as well. So back to these 3 elements that we talked about, these 3 principles of quantum mechanics, of quantum physics, of quantum theory: subatomic, entanglement, and non-binary. When we start to apply them to the concept of transformation projects and programs, then we can start to think about something else. We start to think about the subatomic element. And again, thinking back to that video, the sheer volume of data that is available to us, it becomes infinite in terms of number and volume. So the data that is available to us and the potential possibility for us to harness that data to solve problems and to create new opportunities is absolutely massive. It also, from an entanglement perspective, is really interesting, because security and safety become both an opportunity and a vulnerability. So our ability to understand security and safety as an opportunity as well as a vulnerability is incredibly important when we're thinking about entering into the world of quantum transformation that is dawning at the moment, and thinking about the complexities that we have, of course, around digital transformation. And the final thing is with everything that we saw in that video, we've got speed. What we saw in that video is that with the dawn of quantum transformation that will, in our lifetime be here within the next 5 to 10 years, the speed at which we will be able to solve the wicked problems of our systems, of our society, of the world, will be solved in a matter of moments, not necessarily years, that are where traditional supercomputing is at the moment. So data, security and safety and speed are three key elements that are absolute fundamental building blocks for the vision, the strategy, the design, the build and the delivery of quantum transformation projects and programs. And one of the things that I say a lot to to leaders and practitioners in digital transformation projects and programs is this: data literacy is arguably far more important to us than digital literacy moving forward. And and I would say that spending more time and effort and resources on helping people to understand digital literacy and ethics around data literacy and ethics around data is far more important for us and far more valuable moving into a quantum future than digital per se. So when we're thinking about quantum transformation, really what we're saying is, what is the capability that is required? What are the skills? What are the roles that are required? And what are the competencies required, as well as how can we prepare for this? And there are an awful lot of software organizations and technology organizations already starting to work with network architects and starting to work with the idea of the technology architecture of organizations in preparation for quantum on its way. We already have, supercomputers, and we have supercomputers that are launching in the not too distant future. And that's just the precursor to quantum, right? That's just basically the tipping point towards what quantum will give us. So it's really, really interesting for us to recognize that. So quantum transformation is really about thinking about data rather than digital. So instead of digital transformation, quantum transformation really hones in on data. It is also balancing out the idea of safety and security as an opportunity as well as a vulnerability. And what that means is, instead of making it the domain of expertise of wonderful, intelligent people that we might have around cybersecurity, etc., but making it everybody's role, making it part of everybody's understanding, because it's really important. And of course, speed. Speed means that we need to be prepared. The speed at which we will be able to shift, we need to be prepared to respond. We need to be prepared to be spontaneous. And that is the promise of quantum transformation. Something that is really important as well for us to understand is the reality of this, the inevitability of this. You might still be thinking that Mel's delivering a little bit of a leadership transformation workshop today that is all about science fiction. It's all about, I don't know, it's so future, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. Yes, quantum computers are still in their early days and they're not available commercially, but the services around quantum technology, around quantum mechanics and theory are available. IBM and Microsoft are already are already delivering some of these services to customers. So there is stuff out there. It is already happening. The inevitability is already being greenlit. It's already started. So for us to be able to crest this wave, for us to understand and start to think about the capability and to be prepared is incredibly important. If you're working on digital transformation, then I would urge you to think about how that digital transformation will start to edge and transition into quantum transformation in order for it to be prepared and to have the capabilities for what is inevitable. You may very well have seen the digital maturity readiness model. So the digital maturity model that is out in the marketplace. You can look at it and search for it in a browser, and the global established kind of maturity levels are 1, 2, and 3, what you see here. So the digitization, which is the early days of transformation within the world of digital. And some of us are still there, you know, some of us are still grappling with digitization, which is the shift from physical to digital. So a physical notebook, how I write, becomes a digital notebook, how I write. I'm still doing the same thing, but I'm doing it within a digital environment as opposed to a physical environment. That's what digitization, the dawn of digitization gave us. But the key downside of digitization was that we focused in on one step in the process. We focused in on one particular element of physicality of analog and digitized it. It was a channel shift. It was a single channel shift, which was great for that one bit, but it didn't necessarily give us the chain reaction. It didn't give us the end-to-end understanding of a possibility. And that's where digitalization comes into play, where digitalization is where we are, and this is probably where we are most comfortable with our projects and programs around transformation today, is where we are mapping processes, our current as is situation, and out of those processes, what we are able to do is we are able to identify efficiencies and productivity potential. And that might be through robotic process automation, that might be through the simplification of processes in order for us to make things more efficient and to make things smoother, as you can see in the example here on screen. And then some of us are also in this true mature world of digital transformation, you know, where we are no longer breaking down the silos within our system so that we can talk together to map the end-to-end processes within our organizational ecosystem, within our organizational system, to get things smoother, to get things more productive, and to get things smarter and more efficient. We're actually breaking the walls beyond our system. So we are now connecting not with the old silos within our corporate systems. We're connecting externally. We're connecting with partners. We're connecting with more diverse organizations and stakeholders. And when we're doing that, then the true promise of digital transformation starts to become realized in our strategies and in our plans. As you can see here, you know, we're able to potentially predict the needs of a human before the human even knows that they need something themselves. We are able to give value to that human beyond what they have particularly asked for. So that's exactly what you can see in the example that I have dropped in here. But is that where it ends? You know, because when we think about the digital maturity levels, that's essentially where we're at. But does quantum transformation start to give us something new? Should we be thinking beyond this? Is this a ceiling that needs to be broken, or is this a ceiling that is just the box of finite? Well, I suggest that there's definitely something more. And if we think about breaking the ceiling of digital transformation, what does it give us? It gives us the opportunity to solve the problem or the requirement before it becomes a problem or a requirement. With all of that data, with all of the potentiality for that safety and that security, with all of this computing speed and the infinite possibility and potential that is provided to us within the concept of quantum, it means that the very problems, the wicked problems, can actually be addressed before they potentially become problems. Yes, of course, the ones that already exist can clearly be solved potentially. But what I'm saying here is quantum transformation allows us to think more about how do we remove the problem, and therefore what do we start to unlock in terms of shifting society, in terms of redesigning society, in starting to think about how communities and work and business exist. Society, work and business, economics, education, etc., etc. All of this becomes real when we start to think about quantum transformation. So everything that I've spoken about today really is about preparing ourselves for the inevitability of breaking the glass ceiling of digital transformation and entering into this new world, perhaps, of what I'm calling quantum transformation. Really interesting, and certainly for me, something that we should all be at least thinking about and being open to. So we want to stay ahead of that curve, as the World Economic Forum says. And in order for us to stay ahead of that curve, and this is a quote that is absolutely talking purely about quantum transformation, to stay ahead of that curve, we've got to think differently. So I challenge everybody today not to think about what I've just shared in your old way of thinking, but to be open about thinking differently, to shifting our mindset to the possibility and the potential of the inevitability that is around the corner. And this mindset shift, this how, is about quantum leadership, isn't it? And this is what we talk about in the Practitioner Leadership Academy, where we really humanize transformation, where we are able to think about ethics and well-being and who we are, not just what we do. And when we are able to design that into our own practice as role models, when we are able to design that into the strategy and the build and deployment of our transformations, we are able to achieve agile at scale. And when we're humanizing transformation, when we're achieving agile at scale, of course, what we're doing is accelerating success. So with the principles and the dimensions and the mindsets and the multiple practices within the Dilyn Way framework, we are training practitioners all over the world to become quantum leaders. And we're developing leaders. We're nurturing and fostering, coaching and mentoring practitioners of change and transformation and leaders to become the role models in order for us to humanize, to achieve agile, and to accelerate our success into that inevitable world of quantum transformation. If you would like to know more about that, if you feel that you yourself have got all of the potential and the motivation and the curiosity to understand more about how you can be a quantum leader, how you can start to bring in elements of quantum transformation into your own projects and programs to humanize them, to accelerate success through agile at scale, then I invite you to one of my strategy sessions. And my strategy sessions are available to everybody and no charge to them. But what I do is I spend an hour to 90 minutes with you in a confidential conversation, talking about your now, your future, and how we might be able to map a process to get you there, and to talk about the program, which is all around the Dilyn Way, that could actually potentially get you there even faster. And there we go. So it does all start with you. The practice of transformation really does start with you. And that is so incredibly important in our work when we are certifying practitioners to build and design human transformation, when we are developing future leaders and quantum leaders so that they can role model in their own practice. It starts with you. The domino effect always starts with you. And the way that we do that, just to give you a little bit of a look into our approach, is called the power of one. And the power of one is a really important element of modern change and transformation practice and modern leadership. And if we like to do today's, we can use the word quantum in front of leadership and quantum in front of transformation. When we talk about the power of one, subatomic, when we talk about the power of one within our framework and within our certification programs, we talk about two elements. We talk about the 45% of our practice that is unconscious practice, as well as the more established and the more familiar development programs that you might be that you might have seen or you might have been on yourself, which is that conscious practice, the decisions and the thinking that we have within our 55%. That's our practice, right? So that's your day. That's your day today, tomorrow, yesterday. Your day, your work practice day is essentially 45% unconscious practice and 55% conscious practice. And we work equally on those two elements in what we call the power of one approach to develop and nurture quantum leadership and mindset shift. And that's what we do. And we do that through quantum actions, and we do that through quantum habits. And the quantum actions are what we call power-ups, and these are 1% marginal gains. And that is really, really important, because that allows us to affect change in our conscious practice. But we also have an approach called the habit cycle as part of the power of one that helps us to release old habits, to identify habits that no longer serve us, and to build new habits that help and nurture us into mindset shift, to different ways of thinking, to thinking differently, more as a modern quantum leader and practitioner, as opposed to a traditional leader and practitioner. And, you know, what I've got here is a couple of slides that I will share with everybody if they would like, just to give you a flavor for how we talk about not just habit, but quantum habit, not just thinking differently, but quantum thoughts of difference. And we also have a canvas, we have tools, and we have materials and products that support how we shift into those elements of modernity. So coming to the end of today, we've got a few minutes left, and I'd love to open up to questions as well, but I'll stop the recording for those questions. I always share some banana skins, don't I? I always share some banana skins. I know that today's subject is incredibly expansive, you know, in terms of it being all about quantum in terms of your own leadership, quantum in terms of the projects and programs that you might be working on. But there are some banana skins, things for us to think about. And the first one that I want to share with you today is not going small enough. And I honestly, you know, I can tell you that there's always a way in. It doesn't matter how you know fixed you might feel somebody else's thinking is, or how closed a process or a way is forward. There will be a place where the door is unlocked, if not open. So it's how small can you go? So, you know, never think that you've gone so small that you can't move forward. There is always a smaller option for you. And the other thing as well, I think, is compromise, is compromising the opportunity of the future by using the rules of yesterday. And I think that's the reason why so much digital transformation, you know, statistics talk about failure as opposed to success. It's because we're still trying to use the old thinking to be and do different. And we know that that in itself is a law that Einstein has shared with us. In order for us to do different, we need to be different. So we need to create new rules. We need to release and you know, and not compromise old not compromise new for the old. It's so incredibly important. So in summary for today, the power of quantum is absolutely inevitability. The power of quantum is something that we should be thinking about. The power of quantum in who we are as a leader, the power of quantum in what we are doing and how we are designing and practicing projects and programs is so incredibly important. It positions leadership differently. It positions transformation differently. It challenges, it allows us, it gives us the tools, it gives us a conversation, it gives us a narrative to challenge established thinking and behavior. And one of the most important things is we are in a world that is defined by complexity. It means that we might have known problems, but there are multiple right answers. There are multiple solutions for those problems. So the solutions are unknown, which means that we need to embrace uncertainty. And in order for us to embrace uncertainty, we have to release the old rules. And to release the old rules, we have to think differently. And to think differently, we need some techniques. And that's where the power of one comes into play. So there we go. That's a little bit about quantum leadership and quantum transformation for this week's leadership roundtable around humanizing transformation. What I've got here is I've got a few links which I think are fantastic, a podcast and a couple of YouTube videos. Please do have a look at them. You know, take a screenshot of this slide and just have a look at them. If you would like to have a strategy session with me, if you'd like to really take advantage of that, to understand a little bit more about our Leadership Practitioner Academy and how that might help you develop and nurture your quantum leadership, or bring some of the principles of quantum into your own digital transformation to stop the failure at that ceiling, to break that ceiling and to move into quantum transformation, then again, please do feel free to direct mail me. I'm on LinkedIn, and also just, you know, to send me a note at mel.ross@adapt2digital.com, and also join our community, leadin4d.com. It's a free community to join. I am in there every day. It is where we deliver our leadership and practitioner training. It's where the academy is housed, and we have lots and lots of different opportunities for you to engage in that. So please do, I encourage you to join that community. And all I've got to say is thank you for today. I'm going to open up to questions now, but just in terms of safety and security and vulnerability, I will stop the recording. Yes, let's go to some questions. So how's everybody feeling about that conversation that we've just had?